Today we're looking at one of Paul's photo albums. I have some photo albums. This one is from a mission trip to Japan many years ago, and it was a really good trip. This photo album is from a mission trip I took to Africa many years ago. This photo album, this goes all the way back to my college days. There are some embarrassing pictures in this photo album. I don't have a lot of photo albums anymore because everything is digital. Some of you younger people may not even know what I'm talking about. For you, it's all Facebook or it's in the camera roll on your phone. But today, in Colossians chapter 4, I see a photo album. Paul has different snapshots of some of his dearest friends. Many times people read a passage like Colossians chapter 4 and they just skip it because it's a bunch of unfamiliar names. Not me. I love a passage like this because it shows the value of friendship. If someone as spiritually deep as Paul needed friendship, then how much more do we all? And so I'll pick up reading in verse 7 as Paul begins to mention many of his friends. The first photo in the album is of a man by the name of Tychicus. Verse 7 says, Tychicus is a dear brother, a faithful minister, and a fellow servant. What a great way to describe a friend. To Paul, he's more than a friend. He calls him a dear brother. And he really was. We see him in Acts chapter 20. We see Tychicus in 2 Timothy chapter 4. We see him in Titus chapter 3. We see him in Ephesians chapter 6. We believe Tychicus is the one who delivered the letter to the Colossians and the letter to the Ephesians. Paul was unable to do it. He was in prison. And so, as we look at Paul's friends, I want you to ask yourself, what kind of friend are you? Tychicus was a friend that he could depend on. Are you the kind of friend that others can depend on? And do you have those kinds of friends in your life? In verse 9, he mentions Onesimus. He calls him a faithful and dear brother. Do you remember Onesimus? He was the runaway slave about whom Paul wrote a letter to Philemon. It's in your Bible, the letter to Philemon. That was Onesimus's master. But now he's not just a runaway slave, he's a believer. And he's one of Paul's close friends. Well, it might be interesting to think that he is such dear friends with a former slave. How about your friendship group? Is there anyone in your friendship group that looks different than you? Onesimus was a dear, faithful brother, according to verse 9, and at one time he was a runaway slave. Then in verse 10, he mentions, my fellow prisoner Aristarchus sends greetings. Aristarchus, we know, was from Thessalonica, and we will see this in the next couple of weeks on Sunday mornings as I preach through the book of Acts. Aristarchus was in Ephesus with Paul in Acts chapter 19 when there was a mob riot, and Aristarchus was seized during that riot. He was there for Paul during a difficult time. You know when else he was there for Paul? Acts chapter 27 tells us Aristarchus was with Paul on his journey to Rome when he was sent to Rome as a prisoner. He was there for Paul during difficult times. Are you that kind of friend? Can others depend on you during a difficult time? And do you have those kind of friends in your life? Next, we see in verse 10, Mark. He says, Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. Welcome him. Oh, This is quite a change from Acts chapter 15. In Acts chapter 15, Paul and Mark had a falling out. But do you see how the two have been restored? I wonder if there's a friend in your life who, with whom you are no longer speaking. It's always worth it to make the effort to restore a relationship. And there are many other names. Verse 11, he mentions a friend named Jesus, but he's also called Justus. Listen to how he is described. Paul says, he was a comfort to me. Are you the kind of friend who is a comfort to others? When people see you coming, do you drain them? Or do you refresh them? Do you comfort them? That's the kind of friend that I want to be. Verse 12 tells us there is another friend, another photo in Paul's album. This guy's name is Epaphras. And Paul says he is always wrestling for you in his prayers. He's not just praying for them, he's wrestling with God in prayer. Do you have any friends in your life who really pray for you? I'm talking about prayer warriors. I have people like that in my life. Ed Jones is a person like that in my life. If I started naming names, it would take me too long. But do you have someone in your life who prays for you that way? And do you pray for others that way? In verse 14, he mentions Luke, the doctor. We see Luke with Paul in the book of Acts. They were close. Verse 14 mentions Demas. Just says Demas sends greetings. Great. But we will learn later in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 9, that Demas, Paul said in 2 Timothy, Demas, having loved this present world, has deserted me. That hurts. Probably everyone can talk about a friend who has deserted them. It was true for Paul as well. He mentions Nympha, who has a church at her house. In verse 17, he mentions Archippus. We see him in Philippians 2 as well. Look at all of these dear friends that Paul had. I hope you know how important it is to have friends like that in your life and to be that kind of friend in someone else's life. Otherwise, if it's just you and you against the world, it's a little bit like playing ping pong by yourself. This is a game where you need someone on the other side. You can't play it alone. Christianity is the same way. Get someone on the other side of the table. Get someone else in your life that will refresh you and bless you. And at the same time, why don't you try very hard to be that kind of friend for someone else? Thanks for being a part of our Devo. I hope you have a very blessed day.